Hello and welcome to the PDA Society's podcast. We're here to chat about all things PDA to help you understand what people with this profile of autism are experiencing and how you can help. We'll be sharing research, professional expertise and the insights of people with lived experience to help you understand PDA and have more tools to make life easier. So, whether you're a PDA yourself, a family member, friend or professional trying to make a difference, welcome from everybody at the PDA Society. We hope you'll find this useful. Hello everybody and welcome to this podcast on the topic of sleep, which I know will be massively important to many of you. I'm delighted to be joined by our guest speaker today, Laura Hellfeld. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words about your background and how it is that you're here today?
How did I come to all of this? Absolutely.
Exactly.
So yes, I'm Laura. It's so nice to meet all of you. I'm an independent nurse and sleep consultant. I came to this work originally into healthcare to figure out myself, to be honest with you. There's a few different areas that I found of self-care that I found really difficult growing up, including sleep. And I thought maybe I can figure this out if I study it, learn about it, chat to other people. And then I have a couple kiddos that are like me. One in particular is my mini-me. So I've really had to do a lot of learning and unlearning. So most of my work is in those self-care areas or activities of daily living, which I love talking and helping around sleep, food and eating, hygiene, toileting, puberty, and then a lot around PDA. I'm a PDA autistic ADHDer. So this group, this charity, these are my people. And so I feel really privileged to get to be here today. So thank you so much.
Brilliant. So we've got a double whammy, not only a PDA, but somebody who's interested in sleep. So that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I guess it would be helpful if we start off thinking about how big a problem sleep is. If we start off just in the autism community in general, how big an issue is it?
It seems to be incredibly pervasive, affecting, I feel like almost every single family. Of course, like we don't know everyone because not everyone is always counted and what surveys go out there. But I know you and I before this were saying there's some number out there on some survey that shows it to be around 83%. And I would say that sounds probably pretty close to what I hear from workshops, webinars, where it's not every single family, but it's most of the families that come in. So this is a very needed area of more research and more affirming research and more affirming, particularly on PDAers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as new parents, the first thing people struggle with is the sleep deprivation of having a new baby.
Yeah.
And then if you factor onto that the fact that it doesn't resolve itself after 3 months when babies are meant to settle and sleep through the night, then it has a massive impact, really, sleep deprivation on everybody in the family, and the knock-on effects with everything really on a day-to-day basis. So absolutely, so important. So what are some of the general factors which can affect sleep?
It's such a layered experience, isn't it? Being a nurse, I always think of, I wonder what co-occurring healthcare conditions might be underlying here. I talk often of, again, I have not put out formal surveys or formal research on this, but I work with so many PDAers and I start to realize I don't know if I've ever worked with any that don't have an underlying medical condition. So it's something that might be there, something maybe it's been unassessed up until that point, but there tends to be something that's there behind the scenes that maybe is keeping this person up because maybe their blood sugar levels are more unstable. Maybe they're in some more pain than we realize. And in particular, if they've been in pain since the beginning, this was actually a true one for me. I didn't realize how much pain I was in until I was older and realized that wasn't typical of everyone. I just thought everyone felt that way throughout the night. Um, just extra fatigue and going to bed when you're extra tired. I imagine everyone listening to this knows there's those days where you think, I cannot go on anymore. I'm so tired. I cannot believe how tired I am. And then you get in bed, you're like, what? How come I'm not sleeping? Unfortunately, that extra fatigue is also true for our young people, where it can actually really impact them not getting into that deep sleep that they're looking for. So that's always on my mind, is wondering if there's something we can tease out there to help them, or even dental pain. Dental pain is a big one for people because that also impacts that TMJ, that big joint that's near the ears. So we get a lot of ear pain and ear discomfort. And so moving around on a pillow can be really uncomfortable. sensory needs. I mean, I think we can't really underscore how important that is and what we all need in order to feel like we feel safe and comfortable to now sleep. And that's always so personal. The stress and worry, I think that gets brought up so much by families of the young person, their mind is like racing before bedtime. It tends to be a time for most people, particularly it seems like PDAers, where so much of our day comes to a head like at this time that's maybe finally a little bit quiet, that the demands go away. So all of a sudden it's this, I have to process everything. And
Mm.
now that is keeping us vigilant, awake, trying to process information to where we're struggling to access that sleep. Um, Communication differences, if someone needs some communication supports. So we're talking about AAC, the alternative and augmented communication. So anything other than mouth words. And this is something that actually I bring it to everyone because there's non-speakers and our unreliable speakers, but at the same time, those of us that speak, I have found for myself that actually by a late afternoon, evening time, I really need to not speak. And I have learned that I needed to actually bring in some different communication supports at that time. Because if I push through, that's for me, that time goes up until about 7 p.m., unless I'm working at night and then I somehow manage my day um, to do that. I end up kind of overactivating my nervous system to where then I've made my stress hormones really increase to get through that time versus having that more low key, that chilling time before when I'd be expecting to go to bed.
Mm.
So I want to bring up that one. What else is there, Sarah? There's such a list, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about PDA and autism in general is that there can be so many co-occurring conditions. So, and I'm not talking about neurodevelopmental, there could be, as you've said, pain from maybe hypermobility. Could be that some children are tube fed, for example, or need a fan going. So there's the noise element, all that sort of stuff that goes along with it. So I think really you've covered most of them. But it's, oh, yeah, a really
It's a big list.
interesting
And actually,
topic.
maybe the more sometimes that like the obvious one, that one, that elephant in the room I forgot to say is the demand of it.
Yes.
We're talking
Yeah.
about PDAers. I almost forgot to say it. Um, Going to bed is a massive transition. I mean, a
Yeah.
huge transition for any person, but particularly this community of where we like to be in charge. I talk often that it was such a light bulb moment for me of realizing how much I just like, I find the self-care areas so boring and annoying. They get in the way of everything that I like to do. I like to be busy. I like to learn. I like the work I do. I like spending time with the kids. I like being in the garden. The idea that I have to stop what I'm doing to like go to the bathroom or I have to stop what I'm doing to eat, or now I have to go to bed because I need to function tomorrow, but I really want to do this thing instead. I find that really irritating. It's
Yes.
the
Yeah,
self-care
absolutely.
things like, and as soon as you do it, it's like the clock is literally ticking to the next time. And
Mm.
I have felt that for years. So I very much relate to this issue of this idea of the bedtime kind of looming in the background by the afternoon of having this feeling. I actually realized I have this feeling on my shoulders and kind of down the tops of my arms of this like weight of like, I'm going to have to do that later. It's going to be
Mm.
hard. It's going to be annoying. Like I'm going to be finally in a place where maybe it's not expected that I answer my emails or that most of my kids' needs are met besides maybe now we're chilling with a screen. And I just have this feeling of like, oh, I can't believe this really big last demand is here for me, waiting for me. So I know
Yeah.
other PDAers bring that up too. It's a massive transition to go from I'm active, I'm enjoying things, I'm doing things to nothing. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I can liken it to a Sunday evening for me. Around 7 o'clock, I start thinking about work on a Monday morning. It's
yes,
like,
yes.
oh, yeah,
Oh,
absolutely. So,
what's coming?
yeah, I can
Yeah,
remember people used to say as soon as you hear that Songs of Praise, which was a program that was on BBC One at 6 o'clock
oh,
in the evening, as soon as you hear that theme tune, it's like, oh, you can feel the weight on your shoulders for work the
yeah.
next day. So if we stay on the topic of PDA specifically, we know PDAs in general struggle with transition, so moving from one
Yeah.
activity to another. What other reasons might there be for PDAs really struggling at bedtime?
Um, I think there can be, so the first thing that popped to my head, but some of the social expectations around it, and then stuff that we as parents um, hear that we need to be doing. And I find this so interesting because through my years, I realized I was going to be able to access sleep easier if I dropped a lot of those expectations, having like a bedtime routine. I talk about this a lot, like in the hygiene work I do of, I find it really irritating to have to do blocks of self-care, to have to do like toilet, wash my face, brush my teeth, blah, 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 change my clothes. How annoying. I'm super irritated. And actually for me, that makes me more and more activated and more irritated. It's also a block of sensory input, just everything like back to back to back to back.
Mhm.
So I found that my parents would say, you're pretty easygoing. Then by the evening time, I just couldn't engage with it. Or I was then running around the house to try to avoid it, kind of, oh, yes, I already did that. And they're like, we're very confused by it. And I realized as an adult, when I was more in charge of myself, I realized that I naturally broke those pieces apart from each other and just try to break up those blocks of demands
Mm.
where I say to people, I am literally wearing the clothes I'll probably sleep in. I will wear them all day. I'll probably wear them tonight. So most of my clothes are like that leisure wear. I can possibly fall asleep at any time. I don't really wear makeup, so I don't have to wash my face. It's just like those things I brought in for myself. And I might brush my teeth at some point, or then maybe I might still have a snack later because I have some health issues and that gets connected to the food I eat. And when I can eat it, I might not again later. Like
Mm.
it's kind of this idea of letting this idea of having a bedtime routine kind of move away from that, where it's
Yeah.
really interesting because so I have my two kids, my oldest is autistic, but not PDA, loves a bedtime routine. Like he finds that like that social expectation of your kids should have this flow through so they know what to expect and go. He finds that very comforting. And he finds that to feel just like he doesn't even have to think about it. He kind of knows he gets this stuff done for himself. And then he has this reading time, hangout time. He does some stretches and then he just kind of naturally drifts off. And I'm like, how do you do that? And actually, as a parent supporting him, I found it really irritating. Like, are we still doing this when he was younger? And then my younger kid, who's like me, I had tried to slot him into this routine, thinking, well, that's what people say you do, and realizing, oh my gosh, I mean, boom, this doesn't work whatsoever. And it's so funny because I don't do that for myself. Like, why am I imposing these rules and expectations? And it really took sitting back going, I hate this. It makes sense that one of my kids would hate this too. So it's
Mm.
really kind of having this idea of we can move away from those expectations. It doesn't have to be a bedtime routine. It's just stuff you do during this time of day
Yeah.
to meet your needs.
And I think you've raised a couple of really great points there that, bedtime for a neurotypical family is just one activity. It's one seamless transition to getting actually
Right.
into bed. But if you
Yeah.
think about it for a PDAer, that going to bed is made up of so many individual demands,
Yeah.
like you said, cleaning teeth, brushing my hair, taking my makeup off. And even
Oh,
within those demands of just brushing your teeth, that's made up of lots of micro demands as well. How much toothpaste do I put on? Do I wet the toothbrush first? How long do I brush my teeth
yeah,
for? So you can see how, oh my goodness, it's so overwhelming to have to
absolutely.
undertake all of those individual activities, which within them have so many micro activities and micro steps as well.
Yeah.
So I think, that's a really good illustration of why there are so many demands around bedtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, awful. It's
Could I
making me
tangent on
anxious.
that? Could I tangent on that a little bit? Because you reminded me of something to reflect back on it. When we're talking about all those steps, it's so much executive function pressure too. So it's asking people to be really engaged in activities and critical thinking and taking in instruction from other people, having to process that instruction and having to make decisions about what to do for a long block of time.
Mm.
And there's a word often used in sleep that vigilance. So people are having to be vigilant in expecting information coming in. So again, I'm asking then people to be on this part of their nervous system that's activated, that's much more on, that their sympathetic nervous system's having to be like, oh, your parent's probably going to tell you something again, or, oh, you have to remember all these steps. And actually, sequencing takes a lot of energy and
Mm.
capacity. And then we're expecting them to fall asleep right after. And you go, but actually, we need to be the opposite of vigilant. So it really can help support people to recognize those blocks of care for many reasons actually impede that person being in that part of that safe, comfortable, able to just now kind of flow into sleep.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think the other great point you made was around that mindset shift that, yes, traditional parenting is about having a routine and going to bed. However, that's okay if that doesn't work for you and your child. You do
Absolutely.
whatever works for you as a family, and that might look completely different. It
Yeah.
might involve screens, which to most
Yeah.
families are an absolute no-no. But actually, let's think about what's the outcome that we're looking for here. And it's that everybody in the family can get some sleep. Uh,
Absolutely.
and does it
Yeah,
matter if that looks different to what other families do?
exactly.
No, it doesn't. So,
Exactly. I'm right there with you with that. Absolutely. Screens can be such a great regulation tool,
yeah,
such a great regulation tool, something that I can just chill out with and help my nervous system relax down, and therefore I can access sleep.
yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I know on our support service we get lots of questions about screens, and I think the societal pressure is that screens are bad. After there should be a time limit on them, and you can see from a PDA's perspective that, well, first of all, it's a demand. You're telling me to turn
Yeah,
them off at a certain time, but secondly, that might be the thing that actually is the exact
absolutely.
thing that I need. So
Yes,
yeah, okay, brilliant.
absolutely.
Yeah, and again, other thinking about other reasons why PDA children may struggle with sleep. I think you mentioned, about um, parents really putting that pressure on that this has to be done in this way. So, okay, anything else, Laura, that you can think of that might be a reason why PDAs may struggle with sleep?
So I think it really needs to be said. PDAers tend to be discussed as having that more sensitive neuroception, or the idea that our nervous system is making the decision that we don't feel as safe and comfortable as maybe our peers do. And what that really then means is we more heavily rely on our safe people and our safe people to be nearby, where our nervous system can borrow or mirror my safe persons. So whether that is a parent, whether that's a partner, whether that's a sibling, whether or not that's a pet, but we tend to need our safe people nearby to feel more regulated. Regulation is a skill. It's not something that we're like born with, and it's not something that people just naturally build in a silo and on their own. We learn to emotionally regulate. We learn that through co-regulation. And we just know that the research coming out, and I would say adult PDAers talk about this quite a bit, is it turns out we just need more co-regulation than other people. And that doesn't go away overnight. So that looks really different for different people. I still bed share with my younger kiddo. And I just view it again, you said it earlier, is if our priority is sleep, that we get, the best sleep that we can, whatever, however that looks. That means we don't tend to put in these other goalposts around it. We don't say, well, we're going to sleep, but everyone has to be in these separate rooms. We're going to sleep and everyone has to wear these certain PJs. It's that idea of actually this co-regulation overnight could be exactly what they need. If I
Mm,
remove what makes them feel safe and comfortable, that actually means I'm removing their ability to sleep. So we just give them what we need, and we kind of think about it as a long game, that I'm building the skill for them. And also with that idea of, like any other skill, it builds over time, but also that skill, our ability to access that skill, like anything else, like riding a bike, or what else am I thinking of, like computer skills, any other skill you learn, that also ebbs and flows our capacity, to where families will say, but they were sleeping on their own and now they seem to want me back again. And you go, well, that again, it's a skill set to where maybe something else changed in their life. Maybe there was another transition. Maybe they aren't feeling quite as well. Maybe there's just some worry, and they're going to need a bit of that support for that skill today. And that's
mm.
okay.
Yeah, and I remember hearing a really great phrase. There was some parents who were really worried that their children were still co-sleeping with them, and the person giving the talk said it's only an issue if it becomes an issue.
Mhm.
So, if it's not
That's a
causing
really
you a
good point.
problem, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Everybody's getting the best sleep that they can. So, just let go
absolutely.
of that. Again, it's that societal pressure. Oh, they're still
Huge
sleeping in
amount.
your bed at that age. Doesn't
Huge
really.
amount. I know. And I tend to reflect back to parents is, and on the flip side, are we really wanting our kiddos, particularly, so we're thinking of neurodivergent kiddos, right? Do we want those kids by themselves in their room in the dark, awake? And like, we tend to have more ruminating thoughts, we tend to get more worries, and we think those aren't people we want to be just laying there worrying by themselves,
Mm,
actually. So
yeah,
we're really, really doing them right by them by
yeah,
being with them.
yeah. Okay, I'm sure many of our families who are listening to this have been advised by maybe healthcare professionals to attend a traditional sort of sleep strategy training course where they talk about things like rapid return, gradual retreat, or body clock shift back. Are you
Right.
able to just give us a headline about what each of those strategies looks like, and then we can perhaps talk about why they wouldn't work for a PDA?
So I'll have to try to go back into my memory. So my training had stuff like that in there. And during of which I just more disengaged and kind of rolled my eyes quietly. I think right away for me, knowing this would be the exact opposite of what I would need and would support me. And I know the people that I'm wanting to support, this is not for us.
Mm,
So there's things like, so you mentioned the gradual retreat. That would be that idea of maybe I come into the room and to where I'm saying my young person needs to sleep by themselves. And I come into the room and maybe I sit on the edge of the bed and and it's often suggested like you don't talk to them and don't even face them. And then maybe a few minutes later, you then sit on the ground. And then a few minutes later, you like sit in the middle of the room and you get further and further and further out of the room. And to me, right away, I was like, oh my gosh, it's just so arbitrary. Like it's so arbitrary. And when I think about like if I was not feeling well or if I was scared, and if my partner behaved that way, I would be furious. And I'd be
mm,
thinking, I needed support. What was that all about? You know
yeah.
what I mean? And then you mentioned the shifting body clock one. So that has to do with the idea of, let's say somebody, somehow the family has kept track and a young person has always fallen asleep, let's say 11:30 at night. The idea is that whatever you did for that bedtime routine, you do that exactly the same at the exact same timings. You go through all those steps at the exact same timings to have that kid fall asleep what seems consistently at 11:30, and then you would move all those steps to have them shift to falling asleep at 11:15. So let's say you started whatever the first start of your routine was, maybe that was going to a shower or bath, maybe that was brushing teeth. Let's say that was at 10, you would now switch it to 9:45 to get the person to go to bed 15 minutes earlier, and you would consistently do that um, until it seemed like that was a pattern of sleep for that person, and you would bring it earlier and earlier and earlier.
Okay.
Immediately, you might hear hear the issues with this is the idea of everything has to be like exactly the same.
Mm,
Everything has to be in the same order, the same timing. I kind of go, I don't know, because even if I think about myself, I go, well, my everyday is different. And sometimes I don't get to access rest until 2 hours later than the day before. And I need that time for my nervous system to come down, relax. And actually, I
mm,
might not be able to access food because I was maybe more activated. Now it's later than the day before, but that's just reflecting my needs today. So
mm,
I think, particularly for PDA families, the idea of right away you might have heard, well, how do I know that they fell asleep at this time, exact time every time? Immediately you go, this doesn't really work with us, does it? And again, it really asks the young person to go through a very specific routine in the same order at the exact same timings every single night
mm,
ongoing. So you
mm,
go, it doesn't really reflect their day, what they need. It doesn't take into account, like what we were talking about before, all the reasons why sleep might be so challenging. It doesn't take in the fact that they might partway through their routine go, yeah, my legs are hurting so bad. And you could, where I would want to say, oh, let's stop for, let me help you massage those legs a bit and see if that helps you before going to bed. Or maybe actually we need to put a heat pack on them. What do you think we need for just a pain relief? So that way you'll be able to drift off. It doesn't take those needs into account.
mm.
So I don't suggest
Yeah. We know as well that that fixed, rigid routine doesn't work.
that work.
Um, PDAs have that anxiety-driven need to be in control, so
Yeah,
therefore there needs to be negotiation, there needs to be collaboration, they need to be given choice,
absolutely.
they need to be given autonomy over what that routine looks like, and that may change on a day-to-day basis depending on anxiety levels, depending on
Absolutely.
sensory input. So there needs to be that flexibility. And then the
Absolutely.
final one,
Yeah, which one was it?
rapid return.
Ah, I think that one has to do, that was the idea. You can tell how I'm like, oh yeah, let me try to remember what that is because of how much I've never suggested it.
Yes.
Um, that has to do with the idea of how long you take to return back to your young person who is communicating distress. That immediately makes me feel so uncomfortable because it's it. So let's say your young person is in their room and they yell out for you or throw something or use their AAC device to make some sound to have you come to them. And it's the idea that you would go to them, and often it's suggested that you only have certain lines that you say, like, it's bedtime, it's bedtime, it's bedtime. And that you only say that and you try not to engage and you shut the door and you leave. And let's say the first time you then don't respond to them for 3 minutes, and then you would go in and do the same thing. Then becomes 5 minutes, then 8 or 10, or I don't know. It gets longer, longer, and longer. And what you might be hearing as you're listening is, doesn't that just teach the young person that you're not going to respond to their needs? So that's why they get quiet. But
Yeah.
again, when you're thinking of this community who has these intersections with mental health and physical needs, the last thing I want, what if my kid threw up and they need me? Like, what if my kid is in really big pain again? Like, this happens to us, and my older one gets nosebleeds. Like,
Mm.
I don't want them by themselves. Like, that's, and it's also, I try to really also think long term of, I don't know what they're ever going to do or who they're ever going to be with or where they're going to live or with me or not. But if they ever did, if they ever were not with me, what would I want them to be doing to take care of themselves? Like, what would be this life skill here? Or if they ever did have a partner, would I want them not responding to my kid or not responding to someone they care about? It doesn't make sense to me when
Mm.
you think about it that way.
Yeah, and it doesn't really address the fundamental principle that all behavior is a form of communication.
Mhm.
So, we talk a lot on our training courses about the iceberg, where only
Yes,
10% of the iceberg sits above the water, and that's the behavior that you're seeing. Really, what we need to be doing is taking a step back and looking below the waterline and saying, what is it that's actually driving this behavior, and address that
absolutely.
rather than trying to tackle the
Yeah,
behavior, i.e., the child shouting out for its parent. There'll be some reason why they're doing that, and
exactly.
it's our job to discover what that is and
Yeah,
sort that out. So
absolutely.
brilliant.
100%.
Yeah. So if we do touch on screens and sleep in a bit more detail,
Okay.
is there sort of any that you're aware of, any research that shows perhaps that, well, how useful they are for the neurodiverse community?
I think there's more coming out to support the idea that, gosh, I don't know what year it was, but the research that's older now, that was like all screens should be shut off, a couple hours before bedtime, because then you don't make any melatonin. So therefore the blue light. And what I end up reflecting to parents is, I think I think from my position coming from experience with research and healthcare and understanding that there's research that comes out that makes for really good headlines and really good quick social media posts, but those are the ones that you really then need to go investigate, because we often can't reduce research down to
Mm.
a two-word clickbait thing, and it became really easy for people just to say no screens, blue light bad, versus having a more layered conversation of, however, we need to consider that there's people who really need support for their nervous system in those hours before bed. And actually, it's always about balance. It's
Mm.
always about balance. And we also know there's so many adults, this includes like me, where I'm like, well, I use a screen up until very quickly before I go to bed. So I know it can't be true. When you go, I guess am I the one outlier here? No, I know that's not true.
Yeah.
Um, so it's always about balance, and talking with families of, and maybe sometimes what the screen is might need to shift during that evening time. Sometimes for some kids, when families will say, can they play Fortnite up until falling asleep? And I go, well, let's think about it. If they really enjoy whatever game they're playing, that's great. We want them to feel good. We want them to be enjoying themselves at these different times of day and evening. But if it's something that maybe they're having to be very highly engaged in and decision making, sometimes that can keep us in more of that vigilant state. So then it's about thinking of, well, for some people, then, so not everyone, but some people, it might just need to shift. So maybe then they can, if there's certain games where it's more of like a walkthrough, where it's just kind of like chill, you kind of go through that. And then you can maybe shift it over to like listening to a podcast.
Mm.
So that way you can still be meeting all those needs. And so many of our young people also socialize in
Yes.
using these games, and like that shouldn't be taken away. And I always think when I hear those broad statements about the screens, I always think these are people who are kind of showing to me that they are not like in it in our community and don't sit with us and hear our families over what their needs are and how they can access their peers.
Mm.
So I was just, again, everything is about balance. Making it really strict and hard rules around screens often backfires in a way,
Mm.
because if it's something they need, they're going to seek it out and search for it and kind of fixate on it. So then it might be just, again, shifting to after however long they want, really shifting into a different type of screen, a different type of interaction, just so it can kind of gradually let them drift off.
Mm. Fascinating. Okay, so I think we've probably got time for um, not question, but chat. And that is really what support is available for families who are struggling with their children's sleep, or adults themselves. Who do you go to in the first instance?
That is such a good question, because I think it's always changing and there's not a lot. And I find it quite frustrating, actually, because there's lots of families who I think would really benefit from a sleep study, or if they need medication, it can be really hard to access that. But usually, first protocol is going to GP and mentioning that there's sleep concerns, and then asking for pediatrician advice. If you're going to a GP for any reason, I highly suggest writing, like trying to collate or bring together all the information that you possibly can beforehand, because I think we all know. So I've been here in North Yorkshire, is it 11 or 12 years now, something like that. So I and I know my experience is represented by lots of other people too, where we'll bring up kind of a general issue, and because it's generalized, it's easier for someone to reflect back, well, let's just wait and see, let's give it another 6 months, and you kind of leave going, well, I didn't get anything here, not sure what to do. It can be really helpful to bring together as much information as you can of, again, how long has this been going on? Maybe keeping a bit of a journal around like some of the days and nights, or maybe a week or so of how that sleep has been going. What did they need at all these different times? Kind of a systems review if you know the kids in a bit of pain, or if you notice maybe the number of foods they have, you're not sure if they're meeting nutritional needs, because there's also nutritional reasons why that can impact sleep. So bringing together as much information as possible to kind of try to gently nudge them into the direction of, yes, we do need this pediatrician. I have been trying all these things, bringing it together. I often will, for myself and my kids, make a bigger document, and then a one sheet one that kind of bullets the things, because I think sometimes too they're like, oh my gosh, you know. But
Yeah.
trying to be like, no, I have done all these things, I have looked at all this stuff, we do need this pediatrician
Mm.
appointment. And maybe even family history, if you can access that. I know that's different for every family of what information you have or feel comfortable contacting someone, but often there's family history that can be really helpful for you to know as well. Even stuff that's unrelated to sleep, just even some of their other healthcare issues, because that might lead someone to go, oh, I wonder if this is also, you mentioned hypermobility. That's
Mm.
so common. So knowing if there's a family member with like chronic fatigue syndrome, or knowing that they have Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility, can also be informing of maybe that's a struggle in the evening time, because that's when growth hormone comes out, and sometimes we get more of that joint pain. So all of those pieces coming together can be really, really helpful.
Brilliant. Are there any charities or support groups nationally as well that people can access?
Yeah. I think the Cerebra team, sleep team, does a lovely job. They have some online trainings as well. It's a very small team. I went in and did some training for them on PDA. So some of their work isn't necessarily for PDAers, but would work for some other neurodivergent young people. And then they are bringing in more around PDA. It's a small team, but again, they put on webinars, and I believe they're all free. I've attended some of those too, and those have been really lovely.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, Laura, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating. For our subscribers, we will be continuing this discussion on our Learning Hub in a second deeper dive podcast, where we'll be looking more at sensory issues and answering some of your questions that you fed into us as well. So again, Laura, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
So, if you want to hear more from today's special guest, then there is a longer version of this podcast available over on our Training Hub. Sponsors of our Training Hub make it possible for us to create and put out this podcast for everyone for free. As a thank you, they get free access to all recordings and self-guided training on our Training Hub. Thank you, subscribers, for your generosity. If you'd like to become a subscriber, there's a link in our show notes.